Hey there, listener, tired? You're lying there trying to drift off, wrapped in a crisp, clean sheet, likely having showered today, maybe even twice. But hold on, because we're about to ruin that sensation of cleanliness with a little dose of monotonous, filthy history. Today, you are entering the Middle Ages through your nose. But before we dive headfirst into this historical latrine, get comfortable. Find that position where your shoulders finally stop protesting their own existence. Close your eyes just a little, but don't sleep yet, and let the sound of my voice carry you. Oh, and before the boredom hits you like a truck, subscribe to the channel. There is always an equally unnecessary story waiting for you. And comment where you're listening from, just so I know who I'm sharing this foul-smelling journey through time with. Now, kill the lights. Let's enter the night's journey together. You didn't ask for it, but here is a deep dive into the hygiene habits of the Middle Ages. Spoiler, they didn't exist. Actually, let's correct that. Something existed that people thought was hygiene, but today it would be grounds for arrest, a lawsuit, and perhaps an exorcism. And before you say, oh, but back then they didn't know. Yes, that's true. And yet nothing justifies it. Nothing. You don't wake up. You emerge from your mattress of straw and lice like a sweaty, confused larva. The sun hasn't even risen yet, but the smell woke you up first. It is a perfume that blends stale urine, dried sweat, moldy bread, and that scent of wet goat that you pretend belongs to the neighbor, but is actually yours. Your bed is a pile of straw, as soft as a litter box, filled with surprises like ticks, fleas, and a rat you've decided to call Bernardo because he shows up every night to share supper. Your pillow is a cloth sack stuffed with straw remnants and perhaps a loose human tooth. Comfortable? No. But at least it doesn't catch fire easily. That's something. The roof of your medieval house has holes, not decorative ones. They are functional holes. They let in wind, rain, and the droppings of the pigeons living in the rafters. You sleep with your head covered because you don't want to wake up with a blessing straight from the sky. The floor is packed dirt, wet not because it rained, but because the house dog decided to mark its territory. And the dog in this case might be a pig, or a child, or both. As you drag yourself out from under your damp blanket, you realize your body is itching again. But scratching is futile. You've tried everything, including rolling in the fireplace ash as a form of dry bath. They say it works. It doesn't work. It just leaves you smelling like expired barbecue. And speaking of baths, no. Today is not the day, nor was yesterday, nor was last month. Because for you, a bath is an event like an eclipse. Rare, vaguely dangerous, and everyone comments on it when it happens. When you do resolve to wash, you have to heat water, fill a barrel, and hope no one else used that same barrel water before you. That's right, the whole family in the same bath, from the grandmother to the baby. And guess who gets in last? Spoiler, you. But relax. We haven't even reached the most charming part of your medieval morning yet. The trip to the bathroom. You leave the house, take 3 steps, and look at the bucket behind the wooden wall. That's it. A bucket, a makeshift throne, already full, because Uncle Gregory had existential gas in the middle of the night, and now you have to balance yourself over that thing with the grace of a ballerina with the flu. You did what you had to do. Congratulations. Now you just throw the contents into the street, literally out the window. That's right, complete with a shout of Gardy-loo that nobody respects. The street becomes a river of waste, food scraps and dead dreams. Meanwhile, your skin begins to form a natural crust, a protective barrier that the sages of the era believed kept diseases away. Spoiler, it didn't. It just kept the filth in. Oh, and your teeth. Well, they are there. Some of them. You chew with what's left. Brushing? What kind of verb is that? At most, you rub them with a small cloth or chew on a dry twig and pray for the pain to pass. Cavities are faithful companions. Bad breath is normal. Everyone stinks. The concept of refreshing mint hasn't been born yet, and you haven't died from this yet. A miracle. And speaking of miracles, let's take a little stroll through the origins of certain beliefs about hygiene. Because yes, they believed bathing could kill. Opening the pores was, according to medieval medicine, a way to let diseases enter. Therefore, the recommendation was clear: remain filthy. It is safer. And you follow this advice not out of faith, but out of laziness. Because let's be honest, heating water, carrying buckets, scrubbing the body with soap made of pig fat and ash, and then still having to dry off in the freezing wind, all that just to stay clean for half an hour, it doesn't pay off. Oh, and soap. Let's talk about that. A rustic mixture of animal fat and primitive caustic soda. The smell is a blend of melted candle and rancidity. The touch is military-grade exfoliation, and you didn't always have it. Sometimes you just scrubbed yourself with sand. That's right, sand, because nothing beats good friction to rip away your dignity along with the dirt. Meanwhile, your neighbors pass by you and don't even notice, because everyone is in the same boat. A boat without oars, without soap, and sinking in the sludge of dermatological ignorance. And that is only the beginning of your day. After the morning epic at the sanitary bucket, you decide to refresh yourself. But that is where the juiciest detail of medieval life comes in. Water, that liquid substance that you in the 20th century use without thinking. Wash your face, brush your teeth, flush, wash your hair. In the 10th century, it is public enemy number one. Medieval water is a species of liquid Russian roulette. You look at the nearby stream with hope. It looks clean, right? Crystalline, even. Except that right there, meters upstream, someone dumped the bucket from last night. And if it wasn't that, it was a deceased pig. Or who knows, something a bit more human, just without the vital signs, because the watercourse was democratic to a fault. You think, but then why didn't they boil it? Ah, listener, because it was work, because nobody had enough pots. Because to light a fire, first you needed to steal wood. Yes, steal. Collecting firewood in the local lord's forest was a crime. You could be punished just for picking up a dry branch. Summary, either you die of thirst or you die hanged by a thread of feudal justice. So the solution is beer. Small beer, weak, warm. A slightly cloudy yellow liquid served right from breakfast, children included. Why? Because boiling the water to make beer killed the microorganisms, or at least left the intestines in peace for a few hours. Meanwhile, bathing remains a nebulous concept. Larger communities did actually have bathhouses. Imagine a spa, except instead of music, ambience, and aromatic salts, you have mourners arguing about planting seasons and elbows touching places they shouldn't touch. There were no partitions, there was no privacy, sometimes not even hot water. And there was indeed, shall we say, a social reputation surrounding these spaces, a reputation that would make a 20th century grandmother knock on your door with a Bible and a bottle of rubbing alcohol. Over time, in fact, the church began to look askance at this story of everyone naked together, scrubbing themselves with soap made of animal fat, pig, goat, or whatever was most available and least alive at the moment. Result: public baths were slowly closed down by morality, of course, and by the fear that bathing spread diseases, since it was believed that filth protected the body. That's right. You become an onion of epidermal crusts for self-preservation, a shell of medieval defense. You must have noticed by now that nobody smells good. But there is more. The clothes you wear, that single outfit of yours, are also not washed frequently, because like everything in the Middle Ages, washing requires war logistics. Fetching water, boiling, scrubbing with ashes, wringing, drying in the sun. That is, when the sun appears. Result: you wear the same tunic for months, sometimes years, until it simply ceases to exist, turns to dust, and joins the packed earth floor of your house. And naturally, all of this favors the small tenants of your body. Fleas, ticks, lice, bedbugs, and a distant cousin of the scorpion that decided to make your armpit a vacation colony. They live on you, reproduce on you, have barbecues on you. No one is bothered. You just scratch all the time, sometimes even with forks or a piece of bone. The important thing is to maintain tradition. Oh, and brushing teeth, a memory from the future. Sometimes you chew a little tree branch. Sometimes you just spit and pray. The majority don't even think about it, and since sugar isn't popular among the poor yet, the teeth last a little longer before falling out completely. The luckiest ones die with about 3 still firm, but the situation changes a bit if you are rich or noble. In that case, your house might have an internal latrine, a luxury, a hole in the floor with a plank on top. The content goes straight to the moat, to the backyard, or if you are very chic, to a canal that flows out of the castle. That is, when the canal doesn't clog and return everything in the opposite direction. A phenomenon called the revenge of medieval plumbing. In fact, in the most elaborate castles, there were the so-called garderobes, translating to a small suspended room with a hole that dumped your necessities directly into the moat. This, of course, attracted rats, flies, and creative enemy soldiers who sometimes tried to invade through that route. Yes, the sewer was also an entry door, and you thought working with logistics was hard nowadays. And since nobody thought to wash their hands, touch was a biological weapon. The handshake wasn't that common. You know why? Because people instinctively knew that the neighbor might be carrying half the local intestinal fauna in the palm of their hand. This is before going to eat hard bread and onion broth reused from last week. But let's go back to the bath, because yes, some people took them for real, mainly in regions closer to the Mediterranean, where Roman habits had left some trace. But that didn't last long. With the rise of the fear of diseases and religious influence saying that nudity and bathing generated thoughts, let's say, less than holy, the practice was abandoned. Even kings went months without washing. Louis XIV in the 17th century was such a fan of not bathing that rumors say he only took 2 in his life. If it's true, who knows? But coming from an era where perfume was disinfectant, I don't doubt it. So you, simple medieval mortal, resign yourself. A wet cloth here, a bucket once in a while, maybe rain if you get lucky, and pray no one comments on your smell or that everyone is as stinky as you, which is generally the case. Meanwhile, the fear of disease spreads, but the understanding of hygiene does not. On the contrary, if you get sick, the fault will be the bad air, your unbalanced soul, or some random sin, like having looked with envy at the neighbor's turnip. The solution: more incense, more isolation, less bathing. And so, your relationship with water boils down to avoidance. Avoid drinking, avoid getting wet, avoid dying. Water in the Middle Ages is always a bad idea, and you go on with your life, covered in dust, sweat, and a protective crust of dermatological ignorance. Congratulations, you are officially medieval and smelly. You are already stinking, more lice than reasons to continue. But there is no rest, because now it is time to work. And when I say work, I don't mean opening a laptop and answering emails pretending to be in a meeting. It is sweating, carrying, digging, planting, bleeding, and still being thankful for being alive. For now, you leave the house or the structure of wood and straw they sell you as a house and immediately trip over something. It could be a stone, a sleeping pig, or your cousin who fainted yesterday from exhaustion and no one had the energy to drag inside. It doesn't matter. You step and continue, because today is a work day and all days are work days. Useful for your feudal lord, of course. For you, they are just repetition and pain. If you are like 90% of the medieval population, congratulations, you are a peasant. The fancy name is serf, but the real function is doing everything while dying slowly. You work the land, but you own nothing. Everything belongs to the feudal lord, the soil, the grain, the pigs, your soul, and sometimes even your hairstyle. If you manage to get a handful of onions for your sad soup, you can already consider yourself fortunate. The day begins with the sunrise. In fact, the sun is your clock and it has no snooze button. If you are late, there is no scolding, there is punishment. Late? You pay with more hours of work. Complaining? Only if it's under your breath so no one hears. The field is no place for emotion. It is a place for calluses. You grab your tool, a shovel made of crooked wood with a rusty nail that threatens to come loose at any moment. You go to the field to plow, dig, harvest, sowing grains and despair. If you are lucky, there is an ox to help. If not, you pull the hoe yourself with your spine shaped like a question mark, and while you bend over the hard earth with nails full of mud and micro fissures of infection, you breathe the air of freedom. Just kidding. It's just the smell of natural fertilizer, also known as feces of every type of living creature, including human. That is what you feed the earth with. With that, and with your tears that don't even fall anymore. They are trapped in the limbo of resignation. Lunch. Ah yes, the moment of the meal arrives. You sit on a rock, open the dirty cloth where you kept your food, and find hard bread. A piece of cheese that seems to be in a phase of spiritual transmutation, and perhaps a soup, but without meat, without taste, without hope. Just a lukewarm broth of water, turnip, and resignation. The bread is so hard it serves as a tool. Sometimes you eat it. Sometimes you use it as a hammer. It all depends on the day. You drink beer because, as we have already seen, water is punishment. The beer is weak, lukewarm, made from the leftovers of what was already bad. You drink it and feel your stomach say thank you just because it hasn't died yet. And then you go back to work, the sun on top of your head, sweating under a wool fabric that itches as if it had thorns. You think, why don't I take off my shirt? Because you can't. First, because the morality of the time says that showing a shoulder is equivalent to committing a small theological crime. Second, because you don't want to show the state of your skin, full of wounds, bites, spots, and nobody wants to see it, not even you. You go back to the hoe. Your back no longer responds. Your knees scream. Your ankle threatens to resign, and yet you continue. Because stopping is a luxury, rest is fiction, and you don't even know what a holiday is. If you are a woman, the work doubles. Besides the field, you take care of the house, that structure where everything happens and nothing works. You feed the children, sew clothes, prepare food, milk animals, sweep the dirt floor, and still try to keep the lice under control. All this with a baby hanging on your hip and another in the biological oven, waiting to be born in the middle of the night, without a midwife or anesthesia. And if you are a child, you also work from an early age. Starting at 5 years old, you already learn to carry buckets, chase away chickens, get beaten for no reason, and answer, "Yes, sir," to any adult with more than 3 teeth. You spend the whole day exposed to the cold, the heat, the rain, to tetanus in the form of a loose nail. And when you think it's going to rain, you give thanks, not because it will cool down, but because maybe the field will get softer. Or maybe the feudal lord will take pity and release you an hour early. Spoiler, he won't release you. Oh, and if you get hurt, break a finger, scrape your leg, take a hit from a hoe, the answer is simple. Keep working, because if you stop, you don't eat. And if you don't eat, you don't live. And if you don't live, well, that solves the food problem automatically. The cycle is efficient at least. Work ends when the sun hides, but you don't. You still need to walk back home, passing through the same potholed paths, with mud up to your knees and the smell of wet goat. Upon arriving, you still have to handle domestic chores, eat something, if there is anything, and try to sleep on the straw mattress shared with other human and non-human beings. And tomorrow it starts all over again, because the Middle Ages offers no perspective. It offers repetition and lumbar pain. You close your eyes already lying in the straw, trying to ignore the sound of the wind beating against the rotten wooden walls and the rat that just ran over your ankle. Congratulations, you survived another day of medieval labor. And the worst part? there is still a long way to go in this historical nightmare disguised as normal life. Breathe deep, but not too deep. The smell of damp straw is still there. You finished another day of medieval work. Your muscles ache, your soul too. And your skin, well, your skin is in a state that only time can make worse. But now let's talk affectionately about that special topic you didn't ask for. Health. Spoiler, there is none. You sneeze again. Your neighbor's cough has become yours. Because in the Middle Ages, diseases don't just spread. They move in with luggage and all. You breathe the same air as everyone, literally, because there are no windows, no ventilation. And the only filter that exists is the cracked mud wall, where a rat has been watching you since Tuesday. You feel chills. It could be fever, it could be hunger, it could be the damp straw of your bed creating ecosystems. Who knows? Certainly not a doctor, because you don't have a real doctor. What you have is a healer who treats everything with 3 methods: blood, smoke, and hurried prayers, or with urine. There is always a theory involving urine. Medicine in the Middle Ages is based on the theory of humours, nothing to do with comedy. These are the 4 liquids of the body that need to be in balance: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. And no, nobody knew how to balance this for real, but everyone had a theory, and they all involved suffering. You feel chest pain? Diagnosis: excess blood. Treatment: drain blood with leeches or a rusty blade. Of course, without anesthesia, because if there is something that doesn't exist besides hygiene, it is the concept of comfort. You feel a weird tightness in your belly. Maybe it's indigestion, maybe it's sadness, or maybe it's because you ate fermented turnip with bread that fell on the fairground floor. But it doesn't matter. The treatment will be the same. Natural laxative made with herbs, muddy water, and hope. Will it pass? No. But at least you will forget the original problem for a few days. Now let's talk about wounds, because in the Middle Ages, any scratch is a mortality roulette. Cut your finger? Welcome to the world of infections. There is no alcohol, no sterilized dressing, no antibiotic. What is there? Dirty cloth, vinegar, and sometimes butter? Yes, they put butter on wounds because, of course, if it's good for bread, it must be good for skin. Medieval logic. You wake up with a blister on your leg. It itches, burns, and smells weird. Then comes popular wisdom. Apply mud to dry it out, or pray 3 Hail Marys and sleep with garlic under the pillow. And if it gets worse, it was the evil eye. There, medicine solved. The teeth. We already mentioned that brushing is science fiction, but it's worth reinforcing, because a medieval toothache is a spiritual experience. You feel your soul try to leave through the root of the molar, and the treatment: pull it, always pull it, with blacksmith pliers, a piece of rope, or in some cases, a well-aimed punch. There is no anesthesia, only screaming, and perhaps a swig of weak beer to trick the pain. Trick it poorly. If the infection spreads, you start to delirious, the fever rises, you say strange things. What happens? Someone calls the priest because clearly you are leaving, or else, surprise, you might be possessed. And in that case, maybe they need stronger prayers, sometimes even a homemade exorcism. Sometimes you just need a tea, but they will prefer the exorcism. Now think. You live in an environment where nobody washes their hands, nobody changes clothes, nobody cleans the cutlery. When there is cutlery, the pots are rarely washed, and the same cauldron is used for soup, bathing, and dyeing wool. And you still want to know why they catch diseases? Let's go to the bath again, because it deserves attention. We already explained that people avoided it, but some still took it, yes. Except it was such a laborious process that it happened on marked dates, like the solstice or the Tuesday of annual cleaning. You heat water on the fire. If you have wood, throw it in the barrel and get in. Only before you got in, your parents, your siblings, your children, and maybe the dog entered. All in the same water and without soap most of the time. and you thought sharing a towel was bad. As for clothes, you have one outfit, maybe two, but that's it. Washing is a luxury, drying a miracle. So you keep using it until it becomes a second skin. Literally. When you take it off, part of the fabric stays on you. And we aren't talking about style. And then come the plagues, the little critters that make your body a medieval condominium. Lice, fleas, bedbugs, mites of every kind. There is no repellent, there is no soap, there is only itching. You learn to coexist, develop techniques, use bonfire ash, pig oil, or simply give up. The body becomes a living colony of restlessness. And if a more serious disease appears, like the plague, for example, then it's a lottery. Cities become cemeteries, streets filled with carts carrying bodies, and you close the door of your house, pray, and hope not to be next. Masks with bird beaks filled with herbs are the protection. Doctors use them. You just cough or dig your own grave. And after all that, you are still judged by your appearance. Yes. Because even without a mirror, people comment, they say so-and-so looks bad. Seriously? Everyone looks like they fought a blind wild boar in a minefield of mud and bones. But yes, someone always manages to look worse. You, in this scenario, have no expectations. You just accept it and sleep if you can, trying not to scratch so much because scratching bleeds. And bleeding attracts more problems. And you already have too many problems. You think the Middle Ages was only work, filth and disease. I got it right. It was exactly that. But there was also social life. Just, of course, the kind that makes you thank the heavens for Wi-Fi and limited interactions with neighbors. In your village, social life revolves around three places: the church, the market, and the punishment post. Yes, these are the medieval equivalents of the nightclub, the mall, and the cancellation feed, starting with the church, the great center of gossip with a spiritual aura. You go there not just to pray, but because everyone goes. Not going is suspicious. Going too much is also suspicious. The balance is feigning faith and hoping not to cough at the wrong time, because even that can generate rumors. The Mass isn't in a language you understand, it's in Latin. And you don't know Latin, nobody knows, only the priest, and maybe not even him. But you pretend to follow, nod your head, kneel, repeat the phrases with the intonation of a trained zombie, and pray not to be chosen as the next sinner in the spotlight. Because yes, religion is a team sport. Everyone polices everyone. If you sneeze in the middle of a prayer, there is already an aunt looking at you with disapproval. If you miss a procession, rumors arise that you talk to the wind or look strangely at the chickens. It is a healthy environment, like a family group chat with censorship. But if there is a place where social life really boils, it is at the market. You go there to buy, trade, or just spy. And the smell, a mixture of fish, sweat, fermented cheese, and unconfessed sin. The stalls have everything. Bread from 3 days ago, vegetables that double as bladed weapons, and fabrics that seem to have been dyed with sheep's tears. You find people from everywhere. Peasants, blacksmiths, tavern keepers, beggars. And that gentleman who always shows up uninvited and speaks while spitting. The subject is always the same: weather, harvest, rumors, and some public judgment about to happen, because trials are social events, like a soap opera finale, only with more screaming and fewer plot twists. Have you witnessed any? The accused can be anyone. Someone just had to point a finger and say, that person did something strange last night. There. That's reason enough. The trial is conducted by a local official, someone with the same level of legal training as a confused pigeon. The criteria: dubious testimonies, superstitions, and sometimes the color of your hair. If the case is serious, the famous trial by ordeal comes in. How does it work? Simple. You might be forced to hold a hot iron, put your hand in boiling water, or be thrown into the river with stones tied to you. If you survive, you're innocent. If you die, well, God knows the truth, right? You watch from the corner, pretending not to get involved. but inside you pray not to be next. Because you know any disagreement with the baker, any dream that's too agitated, any flu at the wrong time can turn into an accusation. Sometimes you don't even need a reason. Existing with too much intensity is enough. Meanwhile, the square has a special attraction, the stocks, a place where people are tied up, exposed, and humiliated for hours or days. It could be for theft, debt, or simply inappropriate language. Yes, swearing at the wrong time can earn you a prime spot in the showcase of shame. Right next to it is the iron mask, also known as the scold's bridle, a contraption that traps the head and mouth, used especially on women considered chatterboxes. That's right, talk too much, take a helmet of humiliation. Nothing like forced silence to keep social peace. Have you seen people wear it? People who just commented that the feudal lord's turnip was smaller this year, or that the tavern ale tasted like horse juice. Result, a public tour with metal on your face. The Middle Ages was basically a reality show of pain and repression, but not everything is punishment. Sometimes there are parties, religious celebrations that last for days. Everyone drinks, dances, pretends they forgot about the diseases and hunger. No one takes a bath, but everyone crowds together. The music is made with instruments that seem to have been assembled by someone drunk using cart parts. And yet it is lively, because it is that or continue hoeing in silence. You dance with bare feet in the mud, eat something that might be meat or might be a surprise, laugh, scream. For a few hours you feel something resembling joy. Then the priest reminds you that all of this is sin and orders you to pray on your knees in the mud. Party over. Go back home smelly and with guilt. The true medieval combo. Romantic interactions also follow this line. No modern flirting. The medieval Tinder is the market. You see someone carrying onions, compliment the turnips, and boom, arranged marriage. Sometimes not even that. The father decides, the feudal lord approves, and you discover you are married when you are already sharing the straw with someone. Kissing? Maybe. If the teeth allow. Declaration of love? Only if it includes cows in the dowry. Romanticism was surviving together until one of the two died of the flu or fell off a cart, and if the couple doesn't work out, deal with it. Separating is a sin. Questioning is a sin. Having your own opinion then, only if it is very discreet and without witnesses, and even then with calculated risk. In this world, social life is made of facades. You smile, pretend everything is fine, participate in rituals, praise the lords, and try to appear invisible enough not to be noticed, but not so much as to seem suspicious. A delicate game between pretending and surviving. And so your role follows in this society, surrounded by rules no one understands properly, punished for things no one explains, and always a little sweaty, because even at parties, hygiene remains medieval, and the smell too. You made it this far, my dear tired listener. That means two things. Either you have a morbid curiosity for historical filth, or you are already in sleep zombie mode and just haven't found the stop button. Either way, since you're here, subscribe, like, comment anything, even the name of your imaginary chicken. Help this poor narrator who spent hours reflecting on baths that didn't happen just to entertain you before your nap. It's the least you can do, come on. Now let's talk about something good. Lie. Let's talk about medieval food. You wake up already smelly and think, at least there's breakfast. Naive. Coffee doesn't exist, neither the drink nor the concept. Medieval breakfast is more a punishment than a ritual. You chew a piece of bread that is so hard it could be used as a weapon, that is, when it isn't moldy, which happens frequently. But mold is no reason to throw it away. Just cut off the green part and pretend the rest is all right. Spoiler, it isn't. With luck, there is a bit of pottage. The famous eternal soup, an old acquaintance of anyone who has survived other episodes of this stinking saga. If you are a veteran around here, you might have even salivated with nostalgia or trembled. a broth of vegetables and grains that stays cooking for days on end in the same pot without any intention of cleaning between one batch and another. Just throw more stuff on top, a new onion, an ancient turnip, a remnant of dignity. Over time, the pottage becomes almost a relative. It has personality, memory, and its own smell. You eat it, well, it stays inside you for a good while. And meat? Ah, meat is for special dates, like the day the feudal lord tripped and decided to be generous. Then maybe you get a piece of salted meat, hard, dry, and with a layer of fat that looks like candle wax. You eat it anyway, because it's not about taste, it's survival. Milk spoils fast, so it becomes cheese, and the cheese becomes something that can only be consumed if you have faith, because the smell doesn't encourage you, and neither does the texture. But you face it with courage and a bit of desperation. And what do you drink? You already know. Beer, weak, cloudy, served warm, because water is still a threat. Every bottle of water in the Middle Ages has a chance of being your last. And wine only if you are rich, or if the priest lets some leftovers slip from Mass. Now let's get to the seasoning. Yes, the flavor, or lack thereof. Salt is expensive. Pepper, impossible. Garlic shows up. But the rule is simple. Food needs to fill the stomach, not please the palate. Any pleasure you have while chewing is an accident. And when there is really nothing, you improvise. Bark soup, bread with broth, boiled root, sometimes tree bark. And if it is famine season, then comes creativity. Clay mixed with flour, sawdust beaten with milk, bread made with mysterious seeds that make you see stars, literally, because they cause hallucinations and a bit of paralysis. All this served in wooden or clay bowls, poorly washed. The same pot serves for food, washing, and sometimes even as an emergency chamber pot. It is versatile, it is practical, it is medieval, and there is no use complaining. Complaining about food is ingratitude. Complaining too much becomes an accusation. You can be accused of mocking divine sustenance, which, let's agree, is an elegant way of saying, nobody here wants to hear your whining. At dinner time, the scene repeats itself. Everyone sits on the floor or on hard benches around a fire that produces more smoke than heat. The food is the same as morning. The pottage is still there, now with the flavor of charcoal, and you give thanks because there is still something to chew. Other villages don't even have that, only hope and turnips. Now, if you live in a castle, maybe you have access to more sophisticated dishes, but don't get excited. The medieval nobility ate a lot, yes, but with zero hygiene and dubious taste. Peacocks, swans, whole roasted piglets, birds stuffed with other birds. Jellies made with marrow, it is the buffet of indigestible excess. And they also didn't wash their hands, didn't use cutlery, and loved to show power by eating expensive foods like sugar, which only served to rot their teeth faster. You think you would do well at a banquet? Wait until you see the amount of flies hovering over the pigs stuffed with crumbs and aristocratic guilt. Oh, and don't forget the fasting. Yes, many days on the calendar were days of abstinence. No meat, no milk, no pleasure, just water, dark bread, and spiritual reflections, because suffering from hunger was a sign of purification. And nothing purifies more than starving in 3-degree weather with your stomach growling. You eat what you have, thank in silence, and swallow fast, because chewing too much is a waste of energy, and thinking about the origin of the food is a path of no return. In the end, your medieval diet is a mixture of tired carbohydrates, defeated vegetables, and occasional protein. It doesn't have nutrition, it has survival. And if one day you dream of lasagna or pizza, or even rice with an egg, you will wake up with a turnip staring at you from the bowl. After a whole day dragging yourself through fields, eating bread that could be classified as a bladed weapon, and fleeing from justice based on gossip, all you want is to sleep. You dream of rest, silence, a fluffy pillow, a blanket, a minimally comfortable environment. Now forget all that. You enter the house, close the door, or push the loose board they call a door, and face the place where you will try to rest your aching bones. It is a corner on the floor with straw, lots of straw, the same straw that shelters lice, fleas, bedbugs, and sometimes a chicken that decided it was a good place to live. Your mattress is a pile of old hay patched with rags, which creaks and itches and probably stinks, but it is all you have. There is no pillow. The closest thing to that is a sack with more compact straw or a piece of wood. Yes, wood. And if you complain, someone answers, "At least it isn't stone." Comforting. You lie down, but you are not alone. There are other bodies there. It could be your family, your children, distant relatives, or a neighbor who lost their house in the last accidental fire. Of course, everyone together, warmed by human heat and the collective smell of "we haven't showered since the last solar eclipse." Sleeping in a group is the standard, intimacy zero, privacy a legend. The only separation is made with improvised curtains of hole-ridden cloth. Silence, that modern dream, does not exist. There is always someone snoring, coughing, talking, or having a nightmare about taxes, and the dirt floor. When it rains, it turns to mud. When it dries, it turns to dust. The house is as well insulated as a sieve. The wind enters through generous cracks, the insects too. You try to cover your body with a blanket made of raw wool that itches more than your conscience after lying to the priest. During the night you feel movement. Something runs over your foot. Maybe a rat, maybe a cat chasing the rat, maybe a relative looking for their own sandal. Anything is possible. You don't scream. You get used to it. Because in the Middle Ages, anything that doesn't bite or rip off your skin is already treated with gratitude. You try to close your eyes, but outside dogs bark, wind howls, and every now and then some drunk crosses the village singing a sad song about onions and longing. No one sleeps totally, everyone naps. Deep sleep is reserved for the dead. And speaking of that, there is an interesting habit called first sleep and second sleep. Yes, because people in the Middle Ages didn't sleep straight through. They slept some 3 or 4 hours, woke up in the middle of the night, did something like pray, eat, visit the neighbor, and then went back to sleep. An interval in the middle of the night by choice. Of course not. It was the body begging for adjustments. You wake up in this interval, feel the cold, the humidity, the bite of an insect. Look at the ceiling or the tangle of beams, spiderwebs and mystery, and you think, have I died and is this purgatory? But no, you are still alive, just tired and with back pain. And there are the internal noises, people snoring, releasing gas in stereo or talking during sleep. Children crying, an elderly person trying to get up to go to the sanitary bucket and tripping over a broom. All this composes the nocturnal symphony of the medieval home. Now think you are lucky, because at least you have a roof. There are those who sleep in stables, under bridges, in ruins, people who lie on the hard ground and pray not to freeze. Winter kills slowly and in silence, and there is still superstition. Sleeping on your back might attract bad spirits. Sleeping on your side might make you dream of the devil. Sleeping too much, laziness. Sleeping too little, sin. In other words, any way you try to rest will offend someone, spiritual or real. You nap, wake up, turn over, scratch, sigh, start again. The night is long, but rest is short, because soon the rooster crows, and the medieval rooster doesn't wait for sunrise. He screams at any hour, sometimes just to annoy. You get up exhausted, as if you hadn't even laid down, and look around, everyone with the same face. The universal expression of having slept worse than a sack of rocks. But nobody comments, because complaining about sleep is luxury. Sleeping badly is part of the routine, and the routine, you already know, is an infinite loop of discomfort, smelling of burnt bread. Waking up in the Middle Ages isn't a sign of a fresh start. It is just the pause in nocturnal suffering being replaced by diurnal suffering, a well-balanced cycle of permanent exhaustion. And if you are there right now, lying in your soft bed, with clean sheets, an ergonomic pillow and air conditioning, Congratulations, you won at life. Because sleeping without sharing the mattress with 3 cousins, 2 chickens, and a hyperactive rat is a privilege of kings. You get up with your lower back handing in its resignation, still half dizzy, still entirely dirty, and with a task ahead. Getting dressed, or rather, coating yourself in textile suffering. Because in the Middle Ages, fashion is less about style and more about survival with fabric. And your closet is, you don't have a closet. What you have is 1 piece of clothing, 2 if you are from the elite of sweat. You repeat the same tunic, the same hood, the same pants, when there are pants, every day. Because it's that, or be naked and hope no one notices. Your outfit is made of thick wool, hand-spun by someone who probably lost a finger in the process. The wool itches, it irritates, and it preserves smell in an almost scientific way. You put on your tunic with the same joy as someone wearing a sack of onions with no hope of looking or feeling good. The colors, brown, beige, darker brown, everything in shades of wet earth after a storm. Vibrant colors are rare, requiring expensive pigments and processes only the elite can access. You, at most, have access to the palette of rain and dust. And there are the hose, by the way, singular, a piece of fabric wrapped around the foot, tied with a strip. It serves more to form blisters than to warm. Shoes, if you have them, are of thick leather, without proper soles, and as comfortable as walking on thorns. If you don't have them, you go barefoot, because tradition is just that, suffering with coherence. Women wear long dresses with sleeves that could serve as curtains and an overlay that looks more like fashion punishment to maintain the essence, the veil. Because showing hair can cause distractions or be accused of witchcraft. And all this sewn by hand, no zipper, no button, no nothing, just faith, little strings, and stubbornness. And the hair, you try to maintain it, but without shampoo, without conditioner, and with a brush made of wood and horsehair, what you get is a capillary mass that defies physics. You tie it, braid it, cover it, and pray no one comments. If you have lice, and you will, you resort to traditional methods, vinegar, ash, olive oil, and the already classic technique of picking until you see the bug fall. Because capillary health is a lost battle. And the nobles. The nobles wear more layers than a paranoid onion, clothes embroidered with fabrics like linen, silk, and even velvet, all imported, expensive, and completely unsuitable for the climate. But it doesn't matter. It's all about showing off. They prefer to sweat in silk than look poor in cotton. They wear pointy shoes, so pointy they look like weapons. The longer the tip, the higher the status. There are people tripping over their own shoes just to prove they have money. And they wear perfumes, yes, because bathing is rare, even among the elite. The smell is covered with lavender, rose, amber. You see a noble and think, he is clean. But no, he is just aromatized. Underneath those beautiful clothes is the same sweat, the same stains, and the same lack of soap. The difference is that he can pay someone to pretend not to notice. Now, there is a special detail about underwear. Basically, it doesn't exist the way you know it. Boxers, panties, that is fiction. There are wrapped cloths, pieces of tied fabric, a kind of improvised diaper, all uncomfortable, all reused until they turn to dust. And how is it washed? Sometimes it is, sometimes it rains. Oh, and when it rains for real, you get wet. Raincoat? Futuristic invention. You wrap yourself in a wool cloak that absorbs water efficiently. It gets soaked and heavy. An experience of wearing a wet blanket that also itches. Clothes are repaired, sewn to the limit. When a fabric wears out, it becomes part of another. The circular economy is real. A dress becomes a shirt, which becomes a floor cloth, which becomes a bandage, which becomes history. And on special occasions like weddings or festivities, then you take out the best rag. An outfit kept with care, worn once a year and kept away from straw and rats. You wear it with pride, and it itches just the same, but at least it has embroidery. Now, if you are accused of anything, and there is always a chance, you might be forced to wear something as punishment. Weird hats, inverted tunics, clothes with flashy colors as a form of public humiliation. The fashion of shame was quite creative. And no, there is no way to refuse, because refusing is doubling the punishment. At the end of the day, you take off your clothes, or not. Sometimes you sleep in them, because taking them off and putting them all back on in the morning is extra suffering. And honestly, your energy level is already below the floor. You turn to the corner, wrapped in the cloth left over, and pray not to freeze. Yes, in the Middle Ages, style was relative and comfort an illusion. You dressed not to be punished, not to die of cold, and occasionally not to attract strange looks at the fair. And the most incredible part, you survive even looking like a rag doll that fell in the stable. You live, work, scratch, and move on, because there is no look of the day. There is only the look of survival. You continue your medieval life, scratching, carrying, mentally complaining, and thinking it couldn't get worse until you come across the topic that makes any modern nose tremble with fear. Domestic waste. In your house of packed earth and crooked boards, everything is discarded without ceremony. Feces, urine, and food scraps go straight out the window or through a slot in the floor, directly to the street, so that the wind, the insects, or an eventual hungry cat can do the job. It is the medieval equivalent of clicking send and ignoring the mess left behind. You even think about implementing a bucket, but no. It already serves as a deposit for scum, as a chamber pot utensil, or a base for another exercise of morning balance. There is no logic, only resignation. And clothes you wash almost never, rarely. And only really if there is a community ritual, a day reserved for cold water. If there is water available, you scrub manually, rotate in the stream if possible, and even then the gallery of insects gives thanks by moving house or body. Changing clothes is a myth. Changing skin, who knows? Despite this integral mess, there was even a certain concern with public hygiene, mainly in medieval cities like Coimbra, where authorities tried to regulate the cleaning of streets, sewage and sanitation, even with little practical success. But you, over there, live in the rural zone, where regulation is a beautiful emblematic word. In theory, the reality is this: the street smells, the ground is mud or dust mixed with misery. And rainy days bring a hateful cocktail of everything that was thrown in front of your house. You walk down the street and feel that there is life there, and not just the one breathing. Bedbugs, flies, varied larvae, insects that don't even have a name yet thank you for the abundance. You learn to walk with eyes half closed, nose locked, a little bit of contained disgust to survive. And when it rains a lot, the mud becomes part of the house. The content of the street spreads everywhere, and the smell intensifies with repeated composting. Unpleasant surprises on the ground become decoration. You step without fear or with resigned fear. There is no sanitary basement, tank, underground latrine, nothing like that. The bucket remains the star, and you, at the end of the day, think, if only I had modern plastic, I could hide this misery with less shame. This sanitary chaos shapes your entire life. The food, the sleep, the clothes, the air you breathe, even the collective mood. Nobody laughs much. Any joy becomes a wrinkled nose, like an astonishment shared by humanity stuck in the same mud. And you follow, incredible 1,000 words later, breathing the medieval legacy of the non-existence of rational disposal. Because in the Middle Ages, waste is like family. It stays where nature or chance decides and becomes part of the landscape. You follow in this medieval loop, where the smell is your most faithful companion and the bath, an urban myth. But there comes a time when dirt goes beyond skin, clothes, and environment. It invades your collective health. Welcome to the Academy of Diseases, an intensive and collective study of what medieval physiological beauty can provide. You live in a village, and every now and then something appears that everyone knows as fever. It is a familiar visit. It arrives slowly, but with the certainty that it will turn everyone into patients. It is not the 20th century flu. Imagine a hangover with delirium, intense pain, and skin sticky like warm bread. Medicine is limited. You call the local healer, who has a repertoire of miraculous solutions. Herbal tea that should relieve the fever, or an incision with a dubious metal blade to discharge the excess of evil. According to him, the chance of cure is approximately the same as surviving the whisper of a suspicious rat. Disease travels from house to house through physical contact, shared touch. Remember, washing hands was science fiction, and even faster inside churches, markets, and taverns. A cough here, a sneeze there, and presto, guaranteed transmission. It is like the flu, only exacerbatedly more efficient. You try to protect yourself, but isolation is almost impossible. Houses are cramped, walls are wood with cracks, and neighbors show up saying you don't look well, exactly when you would prefer to be invisible. The healer responds with superstitions, putting garlic on the chest, praying in front of a candle, weird clothing, and sometimes, who knows, it works. If it works, wonderful. If not, it also works, to bury you. The plague, when it arrives, and it arrives in cities, of course, spreads with the efficiency of a viral emoji. Rats, insects, human touch, and fear help as extra condiments in this soup of disease. The plague doesn't choose. If you got dirty, you're on the list. And then follows the macabre dance of carts, mass burials, and isolated villages, as if they were castles of people at risk. The majority don't understand medicine. Nobody teaches it. Disease becomes spiritual guilt, sin, or curse. And the cleansing of the soul, in this case, is done with penance or fasting, not with soap. You get sicker, psychologically and physically, but your soul is great, catching any infection, like a cut in the field. The chance of it growing to epic proportions and turning into gangrene is high. You can amputate, or you can pray to survive with the painful limb. The healer might use hot vinegar or salted butter. These are divergent probabilities of success, and none are pleasant. And when you think it can't get worse, medieval diarrhea enters, the kind that seems like forced internal cleaning. You go to the improvised bucket, learn the philosophy of liquid discomfort, and live the thrill of knowing that the water was as dirty as the output. Every flush is a marathon of agony and humility. Hunger comes as a supporting actor, sick and exhausted. You keep working because the feudal law demands it, and the land does not forgive. If you stop, you die. If you continue, you die with effort. The difference is like choosing whether the enemy's arrow will be slow or fast. And hygiene? Just a pale memory. Rare baths, clothes washed when they feel the need. A human limestone that excuses even anatomy. The fiefdom becomes a laboratory of pathogens, a kingdom of molds, and incandescent shadow for infections. But hope, over time, changes tactics. In some cities, sanitation begins to improve slightly, with better sewage, more reserved waters, and minimal street cleaning. Rudimentary notions of quarantine, isolation, and disease control between villages and ports also arise. Slowly, but it begins to graze social agriculture like a weak light, a distant lamp. You follow your path breathing challenges, but sometimes getting up with more steam for breathing less plague. You survive with sacrifice, itching, and smell. And maybe someday, with luck, you arrive at the future where bathing and antibiotics are reality. You are already past the halfway point of this sweaty and smelly medieval journey. And maybe you're thinking, does this portion of dirty imagination have limits? Spoiler, it doesn't. In the medieval century, even hot water is a question of class, authority, and a lot of virtuous laziness. And the package already comes with tragicomic sociability. The first surprise is understanding that bathing did exist, yes, but not as you imagine. It isn't Netflix, a fridge by the side, a bath without freezing water. It was a community event. Yes, now the horror gets worse. People sometimes bathed together. In the community bathhouse called stews, everyone stripped and dove in together, talked, gossiped, ate, drank. It was like the medieval version of a bar, only tasteless and without a private bathroom. If you thought seeing people conjugating verbs in the shower was weird, imagine that with ambient music or lukewarm water, which is already a luxury. Now, for some lucky ones or privileged filthy folks who had money, time, or powerful relatives, there was the option of a more private bath, but private was relative. Few walls, little hot water, and sometimes a bath with scented oil. If you were a lord or lady, would you imagine comfort? Only if there was beer and soap. You feel ashamed for imagining they didn't bathe. Don't worry, doctors of the time recommended it. They knew water cleans the body, but it was work. You had to heat water, carry buckets, share with the neighborhood. Result, bathing became a ritualistic rarity, like a solar eclipse. In monasteries, the story was a little different. The monks had lavatoriums, like a collective sink with running water, where they washed hands before meals. Sometimes they even had cloth caps changed regularly. A monastic mini-spa without a manicure was the hygienic part of spiritual life. If you are thinking through this duality of medieval hygiene, the answer is simple: resources. Water was precious, firewood for heating was expensive, and religious beliefs also helped discourage frequent bathing. Opening pores was, according to belief, letting diseases in. So, taking a bath was advised against even by your personal opinion of protection against colds or plague. But wait, in some larger cities, especially in the Islamic world, like Cordoba, Fez, Baghdad, there existed the famous hammams, public baths divided by gender with heat rooms, amber, steam, and socializing. A whirlwind of clean water, sociability, and exchanges. If you wanted a hot and social bath, the hammam was the place. Some people gathered there before a wedding, a party, or to socialize with whoever also wanted to take that dip. Now comes your moment. The shock of realizing that bathing existed, but it was like a rare meme. You, peasant, barely had time to sleep. The healer barely knew what real soap was. What existed was tallow soap, made of animal fat and ash. Smooth smell like underwear unwashed for 6 days. Only the rich people had access to scented oil, bath bazaars, and clean robes. And bathing was an event, not a routine. Meanwhile, the medieval collective imagination fermented the belief that dirt was a shield against diseases. Bathing was demonic temptation and firewood was gold. A full plate of ironies that you live in flesh, bone, and odor. You continue on this smelly trip, conscious of the scarcity of water and the absence of soap, learning that living in the Middle Ages was like crossing the desert without a bottle, nor the will to stop. And yet you are here firm, scratching even in your thoughts, because medieval hygiene was a spectacle of resistance, and you lived to tell this smelly story. You are surviving day after day in this universe where hygiene is almost a superstition, a rarity for those who can pay, and a subject of gossip. But there is a special moment that people respect with fervor, the ritual of washing clothes. And it isn't Netflix, it is almost a community cult in the village. Washing clothes is a weekly event, when possible really. You wake up early, grab the bucket, basin, or a wooden bowl, gather rustic soap, wood and fat that transform into that, and head to the river, the stream, or the public washhouse. A little piece of land reserved for collective washing, from which comes colds, small talk, and lighter clothes. Arriving there, you see a relaxed line. Women mainly, some children, and sometimes a man who wants to be modern or just escape the smelly sofa. Each one beats the fabric with force, in the weight of indignation and cleanliness, scrubs as if expelling sins, and prays for the view of the day not to itch. While beating feet, tunic, diaper, sock that wants to exist, conversation flows like an improvised podcast. Did you hear? The neighbor's pig disappeared. There is a party, but there will be smells. The healer is full of blisters, and all this watered with cold or lukewarm water. Little foam made with ash and the light perfume of hopelessness. You try to wash your own clothes, scrub, rinse, wring with all the strength you have, and you have almost nothing. Then you hang them on branches, rocks, or an improvised rope. Then you pray for a drizzle, because if strong sun comes, the color fades. If it rains too much, it gets the smell of rotten root. Underwear. Don't even think about it. It is the most emotionally expensive piece. You wash it even less. You manage with a dry cloth, ash, and the same shirt, until one day it becomes tradition. Today is the underwear of the week. And children's clothes? Ah, that becomes a rag for crying while they trip, get wet, and contaminate everything. You try to wash what you can, under the weak sun, with stuck food scraps and silent twisting. But the cycle repeats. Drooling child, dirty clothes, dirty river, you getting dirty again. Now, if you live in the city, yes, it exists. You might have access to something like an official community laundry, like the urban wash house, a covered public space with a stone or wooden basin where several people do their weekly washing simultaneously. The isolated homeland of dirt is over. Now it is a public show of scarce soap and sticky conversation turning into a gossip plain. So-and-so used animal fat soap. What's her name brought scented soap, bragging. A parade of judgments. Meanwhile, luxurious clothes of royalty or nobility are sent to professional laundries. Horses and servants take the embroidered uniforms, noble robes, capes, and they arrive back with an aroma that disguises the routine of collective excrement. In your world, that is fiction, and the sacred clothes, well, the priest's altar vestments are washed in a special way, with incense, heated water when possible, and perfumed with flowers. It is to maintain the sacred aura and not the human smell. A punctual and symbolic cleaning ritual just for Finns. You, on the other hand, pray for your clothes to last until the birth of the next nephew. Over time, some begin to wash themselves too. Washing just hands with fat soap or tallow soap, sometimes after eating, when there is honor, manners and soap. Or washing the face in the stream with freezing water so as not to look dead too early. You try to replicate the gesture. Wash the hand for manners, wash the face for partial hygiene. But the whole bath still remains a rumorous myth, and in monasteries there is a collective sink called a lavatorium. Monks wash their hands before meals with running water from a tank that might have a primitive faucet. There are towels kept in a cupboard. It is almost a primitive spa. The rest of your village, a dirty river or nothing. It is broken, but it is real. In these washings, you realize something precious, the symbolism of social cleanliness. It is not just about clothes, but about being seen as clean or less smelly, at the fair, at mass, in the silent judgment of neighbors. Washing becomes a sign of invisible status. If you wash clothes, you exist socially, but the drama continues. Lack of firewood to heat water, ashes flee, soap runs out, the rope falls, it rains. You keep repeating the collective and resigned ritual, which is your escape route from rotten fabrics. And there are still more words needed to reach 1,000. Well then, while drying, the clothes sway in the wind and spread odors or try to lose them. You observe every fold, pray for it to recall less of the fermented coffee spilled yesterday. When finally it is dry, you put it away or wear it again, because a clean piece is a used piece even without being clean. You change clothes only out of obligation. Taking off dirty clothes is extra work. So often you sleep in the ones from the day before, a tradition of those who do not waste fiber. Wake up, stretch, fake freshness, and if it rains again, there goes washing everything again. An emotional iodine route, but you face it because clean clothes, however brief, bring an almost therapeutic relief. This ritual, beating clothes, rinsing, wringing, drying, reusing, becomes your weekly meditation, an act of patience, pain, social word, and hope that for a few minutes you manage to remember what it is to be minimally presentable in the medieval world. And you follow washing stories, escape and fabric toward the next block, with twisted clothes and a story to tell. You survived the mud, the rag clothing locker room, and the living pot, but life goes on with minimum hygiene needs that, to your surprise or not, were practiced anyway. Although nothing looks like modern cleanliness, there were basic rituals everyone knew. The medieval top and tail, care for hands, and the discreet tightening on the teeth. Right in the morning, before even opening your eyes, you extend your arm without exactly thinking and encounter something wet that isn't a swan. You go there and wash your face. Not every day, but often enough to see that yes, you continue existing. This gesture of washing the face is an almost automatic habit that brings relief. The cold running water mixed with resignation and not soap, but it already gave a sensation of the day's beginning. Even if smelling of onion, hands were wetted frequently, mainly before eating. In most houses, cutlery didn't exist, so you ate with your hands and had the right, by etiquette not luxury, to dip your fingers in a bucket or basin. If the house was less miserable, there was a pitcher of perfumed water or water with rose petals, even if the rest of the place exhaled less perfume than a strong foot odor. The ritual was clear: clean hand, fewer bacteria, or at least visible ones. In the monastery of the nearby village, there is formal washing. Each little brother draws water, claps hands, washes the hand in a collective wash basin called lavatorium, a structure with something like a community sink. Then, each one dries off on the towel kept on a shelf. It is the cleanest medieval spa that exists there. And the teeth? Ah, your poor teeth. No one brushes, but you force a cloth rag on the teeth or chew a dry twig to try to give that touch-up if there is a tooth left. Noble people rubbed clove, salt, or crushed herbs on their malefic teeth. You try to repeat at home, only the cloth is the same as the clothes, and the herb is just what you find in the yard. Result, breath that would make a wild boar retreat, but tooth still in place for now. You think this is all too little. It is, but it was enough to remain standing without being accused of witchcraft or evil spirit. Because cleanliness in the Middle Ages was moral and physical. If you washed, you were more respectable. If you didn't wash, you could be accused of laziness, filthiness, or worse, impure. And then something curious arises. Yes, many washed their face, hands, teeth, but only the essential. The nobility and clergy, with the help of servants, transformed this moment into a mini spectacle with perfumed water, copper basins, music, and clean white towels that vibrated between the hands of courtiers like a red carpet of invisibility. They washed to appear holy, or at least pretend. Meanwhile, you there in your corner of straw and lice, wash what you can and try to enjoy the water that is left. Any remnant of freshness was a luxury, especially on cold mornings. You look at your face in the muddy reflection of a pan and imagine you are the king for a few seconds, but soon some spoiled smell reminds you. You continue smelly, but conscious. Throughout the day, if your hands stain with sweat, clay, or sludge, you try to rinse again. Nothing very deep, just enough for the food not to taste like earth. Rare were those who had a pot with water just for that. The majority settle for the mechanical, fast, almost robotic gesture. Even so, the gesture exists, and at night you wash your face again, now with cold water, hoping that with it goes a bit of the day, the worries, and the crust formed between the neck and the shoulder. It is a ritual that takes you to the threshold of sleep, reminds you of fresh water, and makes you smile. Minimal but true. This bouncing routine of minimal washing, ritualistic but real, is the rarefied island of hygiene amidst medieval filth. It wasn't a turbo bathtub, it wasn't perfumed, mate, it was a cup of cold water, a damp cloth, a crunchy twig for a tooth, but it was the closest to cleanliness you could get. So you sleep not clean, but instructed, with a face less sticky, a hand less tacky, and teeth still there. Just that is already an advance, and you wake up in the next chapter, ready for another round of smelly medieval life. The collective smell includes sweat encased in wool clothes for days, pottage boiling and reverberating flavors and smells in the air, a mixture of healing herbs, animals kept too close, and excrement as a seasoning nobody asked for. It is the official perfume of your day. The plague, when it arises, gains a soundtrack and special aroma. Corpses, after too much time exposed, exhale an aromatic component from the beyond. The strongest feel the nausea, and you just think, at least it will relieve this social breathing. The people try to protect themselves in some way, with incense, with bird masks, with perforated beaks filled with aromatic herbs, with sauerkraut or something similar. The smell in this case becomes a sacrament. Smells bad, then it is plague. Smells better, it is just disguised shame. The balance is a mirage. You feel that every street has its thematic aroma. The blacksmith street smells of smoke and iron. The butcher's street exhales ox humor and numbed blood. The alley near the tavern is a cocktail of sweat, old beer, and limitless laughter. Collective hygiene is almost zero. People share the air and the odors. If the wind changes, your nose changes too, and it learns to identify who passed where. The latifundium of bread lovers stinks differently from people who drink herbal tea, and the smell of the farm has its own signature that you can only perceive when you enter. You survive in this and begin to develop a species of olfactory radar. Does it smell like a recent bath here? No. Then keep distance. It's all an instinctive strategy of nasal immunization. And then you realize that the smell was part of the social fabric. If it smelled better, it was a party. If it smelled worse, it was an excuse for the 30th short film about the plague. You don't complain. Adapting was the rule. If you try to claim a canvas of smells, they take you as a heretic during outbreaks. Smelling good becomes a status symbol. If you have perfumed oil, if you change into clean clothes, if you avoid recent excrement, you tend to be seen as someone, but in general, this smelly elite was still immersed in this aromatic miscellany. And you remain there breathing everything until you learn something curious. The most striking smell isn't of the dirt, but of shared survival. It is the odor of people who wake up, scheme, improvise, wash their face when possible, and still put a foot outside thinking, I can breathe for one more day. Sometimes the collective odor impresses you more than the misery. It is like concrete culture. It is vivid. You remember people before seeing their faces by the smell. It is memorable and dreadful, but memorable nonetheless. And this experience molds your sense of community. Nobody escapes, everyone stinks together. And it is this putrid uniformity that ends up creating, amazingly, a sentiment of smelly solidarity. So you breathe deep, or try to, and move forward, because the odors of history are part of humanity's heritage. And you lived this, live smelly, but conscious of every filament of air that surrounds you. Soon, only the final block remains. And then, yes, you will be able to close your eyes with this smell of history stuck to your soul, but at least with an almost complete ritual. You made it this far, survivor of this medieval epic of smells, crooked teeth, and epidermal crusts. It is time to close the spectacle without wake up, sleep, and wake up. But how does the thing really end for those who lived in this world of encyclopedic filth? Let's wrap up this nightmare with the same dragging rhythm with which the dirt accumulated. Natural, without rush, and with that little taste of phew, it's over. You finish another day or another eternal cycle with the smell impregnated, muscles tired, bones stuck in repeated clothes. But what matters is the conclusion. You survived. Even if no one held a ceremony to celebrate, your persistence is already medieval glory. The day ends with that sweet resignation, as if the dirt were part of you. You think, if tomorrow they wake me up with excrement, at least I am used to it. The mud became company, the odor became a soundtrack, and the bath, well, it was like a historical unicorn, talked about, desired, and extremely rare. And now, while this final block extends in the air, almost like that smelly cloud no one comments on, you will realize that you survived an era when there was no decent toilet paper. Bathing was a rarity, clean clothes were a legend, and the science of washing hands only arrived when they had already invented the plague. But you blew out the candles scattered on your face, clenched your hardened fists, and moved on. And that, in this foul-smelling Middle Ages, is probably the greatest feat of all. Right here, in your contemporary moment, you are ready to close your eyes. The nose might be rolling its eyes, but sleep is coming, and the text closes with the same anticlimax that medieval life had for any idea of hygiene. Good night, tired listener, and until next time, sleep with a tired story.